Morning, children. Right. I could sit here, judging from how many you are, I could sit and tell you stories all day. But there are some people who I call clock police, who are going to stop us doing what we want to do, yes? So we're going to have to be quick and just do one story, is that okay? Right, but before we start, we want one adult, Sister Jenny, to help us in our story. So you are going to read, yeah? Not now, at the end, you read and it'll come on the board. Just read it on the board. But I'll ask you very difficult questions. Right. What can you see on the board? A crown. What do we use a crown for? What do we use it for? I think you're right. I can see what you're saying, but I can't hear it. Isn't that good? The crown is for a king, okay? So I'm going to tell you a story about the king's well. Now, some of you will not have any clue what a well is. So I'm going to have to show you some pictures. I think it's that one. Yeah. That's what a well looks like. Why do we need a well? Yes? To get water. Now, if you want the best water on earth, get it from a well. That water that you get from a tap is no good. Honestly, some people even fit filters in their houses because the water is no good. And if you knew what they put in it, you wouldn't drink it. So I always say to people, please don't drink water at all. And they say, why? I say, because fish were in it. That's no good. And the water that you drink comes from a reservoir which has got a lot of fish. I wouldn't drink it. No good. Water from the well is the best water. Nothing lives in it. Nothing can get in. Right? Now, for you to get water from a well, you need a bucket. Now, some wells have got a pump. But it's no good fitting a pump on a well because then people misuse it. Right? You need to put a bucket so people can make an effort to get the water out. And then they don't misuse it. And they know the value of it as well. Right? So, some wells can be very deep. The deepest well is more than... Brother John, what is 200 divided by 3? Okay, it's 66, all right? The deepest well that I have heard of was 200 feet deep, which means it's around 66 meters deep in your language. Yes? That's very deep. It was so deep that if you put a bucket in and you wanted to get water out, the rope that you put in with the bucket would get wet. And the amount of water on it was so much, the person couldn't pull it. So they used to hire a little donkey to do that. So the person would just wait at the top of the well and get the bucket. The donkey would do the pulling. Yeah? That's a very clever trick, that is. So there you can see there. Now, do we all agree that you need that bucket? Yeah? Okay. So, okay, let me just This well here is, that picture was taken in Swaziland. Who knows where Swaziland is? If I was giving directions for Swaziland, I would say, get out of this door, turn left, keep going, there's a pub on your right, go past that, you see a roundabout, keep going, when you see an elephant, you're not far. So, right, so this king, now some wells belong to villages and others belong to rich people. A rich family can have a well on its own. And the story I'm going to tell you about is about the king. Obviously, the king has got a bit of what? Money, so he can afford his own well. So, let me see. What are these I'm showing you now? Can you see that they look like buckets? Can you see that? I need some response. Can you see that? That those baskets there look like those buckets. The shape is the same. Yes? Yes? Okay. So this is really what you should be using, the bucket. But I'm going to tell you about a funny story, really. What you need as well, you need some rope. You need some pulleys. Now, some ladies don't understand the idea of a pulley. So I'm going to have to explain that if you thread your rope through that pulley there, it makes it easier to do what? To lift, right? Ladies like more complex things. Men like easier things too. Yeah? So that's how you lift, okay? You can see the gentleman there, yeah? You can see him lifting, yes? Now, just imagine, now that would have gone in the water to get to fill the bucket, all right. So is that okay? So I can tell my story now, yeah? That was just a preamble. I told you I could be here all day. All right, so here's the story now. Two men, young men. Who is young? Hello, Brother Baker. I didn't see you before. Nice to see you. Two young men. Who is old enough to look for a job? Hands up. But young. Yeah, I don't think you can look for a job. So let's say these two young men were around about 21 years old. That's a lot of years, right? So one was named Harry and the other was named Gary. Yeah, Harry and Gary, they were both friends. So they went to this king's house and knocked on the gate, because you can't get to the door of the king's house, right? So they went to the gate and knocked on the gate, and the gentleman who was nicely dressed came by and said, "Excuse me, gentlemen, what can I do for you?" They said, "We are looking for a job." He said, "Oh, you would have to ask the king." He said, "Well, how do we do that?" He said, "Well, follow me." So they followed him and got to the king's door, and the nicely dressed gentleman knocked on the door, and the king came out and said, "These two men are looking for a job." I said, "Oh, that's good. I've got a job for them." So the king came out and led the two gentlemen to their well, and he gave each one a bucket-looking basket and some rope. And he said, "I want you to fetch water using these buckets, looking baskets. I want you to fetch some water till I come back from where I am going." Okay, so Harry, I spoiled it now. Harry tied his basket to his rope and started. But Gary looked at Harry doing it and he thought, this man is gone. We need some people who do some care in the community. So he sat there, Gary sat over there, and Harry was throwing the bucket down. Now there's a trick you have to do. You have to throw the bucket upside down. When it gets there, it corrects itself, and in the process, what does it do? It fetches water. And he was doing that all day, and the following day, and the following day. And what was Gary doing? Gary was sitting over there doing nothing. So, after some days of this job, very boring job, the king came back and he said, "How did you gentlemen go?" And Harry said, "I worked for so many days. So how much water did you bring?" "I didn't bring any water at all. However, I found some coins that the basket kept bringing up. And here are the coins, sir." And what happened was, the king had a naughty child. And this child found some coins in the house and took them and chucked them in the well. And the king knew they were in the well. He just didn't have time to use the basket himself. But Harry was sitting over there doing nothing. Harry was doing the work. Gary was not doing the work. So what do you think the king did when he came back? Did he pay Gary for sitting over there? Did he pay Gary for fetching the water using a basket? Yes, he paid him really good money. And he said, "You can work for me from now on." So he got a job because he agreed to do a stupid job in the first place. Right. Why did I tell you this story? Now this story, we want to find out who this king was, okay? Because we know his name. So I think the name of the king we need to know. We need to know where this well is. And the king's, do you know what an insignia is? If you get a coin, you will see the queen's head on it. That's the queen's insignia, okay? It's a sign that the coin belongs to the queen. So, adults, who is this king? And where is this story told in your Bible? The king is Jesus. That's correct. Now, he gave us a job. And what Sister Jenny is just going to read for us. Read is the operative word. Right, so it's found in Matthew 28. It says,
"And Jesus came and said to them, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age.'"
Thank you very much. Now, some of us got this instruction from the king, and we found a nice chair and sat on it and said, "That is a boring job." And some others got exactly the same instruction, and what did they do? They did the job every single day and found some treasure in their efforts. Okay? So next time you go to Swaziland, yeah? Where did I say Swaziland was? South of here. South is this direction. Next time you go there, you find that lady at the well. Just ask for a basket. There might just be some good coins in there, right? All right. Thank you very much for listening. Who shall say a prayer for us? Who wants to say a prayer for the children? What mother wants to say a prayer for the children? Should we ask a mother? Any mothers? Thank you very much. Can you just say from there? It doesn't matter. Morning, church.
Good morning.
I wasn't expecting to be here this morning, and things happen that you do not expect. And so I find myself here. Now, I need to ask you a few questions. The first one is, does God change his mind? The second one is, does God have an afterthought? Okay? Right. So he changed his mind then. I say, I like that discussion. When you get home, carry on that discussion. It's very good that you discuss that, because it's important for you to appreciate where you are in relation to God's thinking. I'm not even sure that statement is correct. I don't know if God thinks or he just knows. I don't know. So, I like stories. So I'm going to tell you a story. And when you get home, you can revise this story. And when you are really low at some point in your future, you can revise that story. And we are going to just be on, is that on? I'm going to start to tell you a story by showing you just probably 3 pictures, because the story is about 3 pictures. And I want us to just focus on Luke 19. Don't go anywhere else. Just open your Bible and Luke 19. I'll probably tell you a few stories in the interim. Right? I'll start by telling you that a little boy stood up to preach. And he was only 8 years old. And he preached a brilliant sermon. And when he finished, there was an elderly gentleman in the congregation. And on his way out, he said, "Young man, You are not old enough to have sinned enough to preach about it. So that suggests to me that the best preachers are sinners. We should love sinners. And the verse that we read for our scripture reading, what did it say for those that were not listening? It says, the Son of Man did what? Does that mean he loved sinners then? He did. And he still does. Okay? When an old pastor was about to die, he sent for his 2 church elders. He said, can you go and get them to his grandchild? The grandchild came and brought these 2 men. And now the background to that is the 2 men were businessmen in the community as well as being church members. And they used to overcharge everybody. So when they came, the old pastor had arranged 2 beds, one on each side of him as he lay in his bed. And he said, please gentlemen, lie in these beds and hold my hands. And they did. And after some time, one of them whispers to the other, what are we supposed to do? And the pastor said, you're not supposed to do anything. Just lie there. Because the pastor hadn't been able to talk to these men about their overcharging. That's why he had called them. So he said, Jesus died between 2 thieves. And I am going to do the same. So, these were church elders. Now, can church elders be sinners? Yes. Right. Does God change his mind? Luke 19, verse 28. Verse 28 tells us that Jesus was going somewhere. Now, I have to tell you this before we go any further. Some of you who have known me for a long time know that I have a lot of abilities, but I have one particular disability which I can't do anything about. I can't read and talk at the same time.
No.
Right? So I always ask other people to read when I need to talk. When I need to read, I keep quiet. All right? So, can someone with a loud voice read Matthew 28, Luke 19, verse 28?
And when he had thus spoken, he went before, ascending up to Jerusalem.
All right. And the he in that verse is Jesus himself. In Luke 19, from beginning to end, he was on his way to Jerusalem. What was the occasion to Jerusalem? The Passover. And the Passover preparation was all about him. Jesus was going to the most important occasion of his life on earth. He was going to be bearing the sins of everybody. And he was also going to be crucified. And see what I mean? I can't speak and read at the same time. I've just lost my notes, so I'll get them back in a minute. No. So what was he going to do? They were going to crucify him. Now, and Jesus knew this. Now, there are not many people on earth that know that they are going to die in the immediate future, right? There are not many. And those that do usually are on death row. And they are not told what date that's going to happen. Now, Jesus knew exactly what date he was going to be crucified. And he was prepared for it. So, if you were in his shoes, your mind would just be on that. Okay? We know by the way that he acquired the donkey, we know that there was no invitation sent out for this ceremony. The ceremony that he was going to be the main character in that ceremony, the crowning of the king. However, there were going to be a lot of people. He knew that, so therefore he had to meet that appointment. Yeah? He could not miss that appointment. And if you get that frame of mind and you focus on that and think about how you would be in that sort of situation, you would very quickly conclude that you would not have any distractions. That would be your main focus. So pastor rings me on Wednesday and said, "Can you go to Stoke?" I said, "Pastor, I haven't got a sermon that I can preach at Stoke. They know everything." He says, "No, you got to go to Stoke." I said, "Oh, okay, then I'll go." So what do you think my frame of mind is from Wednesday 10 o'clock to this morning? What is it I'm going to talk about at Stoke? Right? Compared to the scheme of things in what was on Jesus' mind, it's almost mundane, isn't it? Jesus was going to be the guest of honor for a ceremony that was going to be for every single human being already born and to be born. There is currently about 7.6 or 7.7 billion people on earth. There's a website you can go and you can see them increasing. It's quite interesting to think babies are born at that rate. But that's what's happening. So that's Jesus' frame of mind. And for some reason, he passes on his way. He passes through a little town called Jericho. To me, when you say town, you give the impression of a few people who live together in very close proximity, right? And these people, when something is exciting, what do? They come out. If you want to see how many neighbors you have got, drive your car at high speed and crash into something. And see how many of them come out. Right? That's what Jericho was. Jericho is still there. So Jericho them days, what they called a town was probably, I don't know, maybe 2,000 or so people. A city might have been double that. I don't know. Guessing. So we find that Jesus is now in Jericho. And he is minding his own business. He is focused on can somebody give me a Bible, please? With So he's focused on his ceremony in where? Jerusalem. So he gets in Jericho, and there's a little man, and this little man is named Zacchaeus. Now, before I understand any story, I want to see what the point of it is. If you read the story, you then get to the end of it and you say, what was that story about? And you try to understand it. Now, there are several types of stories. Some stories are timeless, which means you have to take note of what's in the story, regardless of which generation you belong to. The next question I ask is, why was a lot of things happened? So why was this particular thing included in the Bible? If everything that has happened during Jesus' time was put in the Bible would probably be very large. Let's just agree that way. So why would a story about a short little man be included in the Bible? And I put it to you that the reason is because, yes, are you asking a question? No. It's probably because something happened in the mind of God about this little man. So, the little man's name was Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus came out after hearing the commotion, and he headed for where the commotion was. And when he got there, he very quickly found out that he could not see the main player, and he tried everything. He put his phone on his selfie stick, and he raised it to try to take a picture. But when he did, he looked at the picture and he could not work out which one was Jesus. Nobody told him. Now let's look at the background of Zacchaeus to begin with. The Bible tells us that Zacchaeus he had a job. What was his job? No, that was not his job. Please read in the Bible correctly. What was his job? The chief of the tax collectors. Now, tax collectors were collecting tax on behalf of which government? The Romans, which was a foreign government. You understand? It's like UK tax collection going to France. I'm sure there will be a lot of disagreements on that. So Zacchaeus was a tax collector, the chief tax collector. Now, to me, it works like a pyramid. How many of you have taken part in pyramid scams? Do you know what a pyramid is? So the guys at the bottom do all the work and pass over the profits to the next person, who passes over the profit, and the one at the top gets the profits from everybody at the very bottom. You understand? That's what's called a pyramid scheme. And Zacchaeus was in such a position. In fact, your Bible says, I will show you where it says that. He wasn't even sure whether the tax system was accurate or not. He was a very rich man. I am very sure that he could not explain how he got rich. If your boss calls you at work and just says, "Excuse me, from today on, I will pay you as a director of this company," you can explain how you got rich, can't you? Zacchaeus could not. And it's quite apparent in the Bible that he could not. So Jesus is walking along, and Zacchaeus has tried his best to see him. Now let's agree on one thing. Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus. It's not clear in the Bible why he wanted to see Jesus. Was it just curiosity? Why did he want to see him? What was the point? Now Jesus was a young man at that time. He was around 33. Young. You expect young people to be obsessed with the celebrity, don't you? Right? Not older people. Now Zacchaeus, because of his position, was a much older man, I would say. So he tried his best, and there was too big a crowd. And he made up a plan. He said, "I will see what I can do." So he ran ahead and found a tree. Now, that tree there, trees are very important to earth. And Zacchaeus went up this, not this particular one, but he went up a tree similar, a sycamore tree. And he thought to himself, "I will see him from here." Now, the first thing that you need to ask yourself, how did he know Jesus was going to go that way? One of my associates asked me what a coincidence is. And I said to him, it's like mother and mother marrying on the same day. That's a coincidence, isn't it? Would you agree? No? That's exactly the same as in this coincidence about Zacchaeus going ahead and Jesus happening to go in that direction. That's why this story is in the Bible. There are too many coincidences that are not coincidence. So Zacchaeus is up a tree. That picture is not a good picture for Zacchaeus. That's a wrong picture of what this is about. I want you to get the good impression. That one is more like what happened. Now, at Stoke Church, there are not many people who think like Zacchaeus. I'm surmising. Zacchaeus gave himself what we call a vantage point over everybody else. He wasn't elected by the congregation. He gave himself. Okay? There's a lot of people in the Bible that gave themselves the vantage point. And the Bible says, when you go to a party, do not sit in the what chair? Don't sit in the high chair. What do? You sit in an ordinary chair, and the people will come and say, "Sir, you should have sat in the high chair." Zacchaeus sat on his own in the high chair, as far as looking at Jesus was concerned. And he sat and waited. And when Jesus got there, he could see everything. Now, the picture shows us that it was very easy to identify who Jesus was by by the dress, but it might not have been. They might all have been in white. We don't know. But when they got to the tree, Jesus is preoccupied with his journey to where? To Jerusalem. And when they go to the tree, Jesus stops. And he looks up the tree and he says, Zacchaeus, come down, for today I am having lunch at your house. Let's agree that nobody told Zacchaeus that he needed to see Jesus that day. He worked out that himself. Most of us will know when we need to see Jesus that day. But what do we do about it? Now, when Zacchaeus was asked to come down, he said, come down when? Now. Zacchaeus had a choice. He could have climbed a bit further. He could have said, it's all right, I'll come down in a minute. He could have done all sorts of different things, or even refused to come down totally. I read a story, no, I didn't read it. I saw a film about a chap named Clint Eastwood. How many of you have heard of Clint Eastwood? When he was a police officer, and he was called to a case where a young man was threatening to jump from a high building. And he went up there, and the young man said, if you come any further, I will jump. And he said, sorry, man, I didn't come here to stop you jumping. He said, so what do you come there for then? He said, I just want to see you jumping properly. He says, just think about it. If I stop you jumping, I will disappoint all them people gathered at the bottom there waiting for you to jump. So Clint Eastwood sits over there. And the man is now thinking, so I'm just jumping to entertain those people down there. So he didn't jump. This is what happens. And Zacchaeus could have changed his mind, could have done anything. Jesus says, come down at once because I'm having lunch at your house. That is the funniest invitation, self-invitation for dinner I have read in the whole Bible. Right? When you come to church and someone just comes to you and says, excuse me, I'm having lunch at your house, you say, sorry, come next week. Isn't it? Yeah? A case happened in Namibia. Namibia is not far from Swaziland, which I was talking about earlier. And a man was coming to church every week, and not many people spoke to him. And he looked miserable because his family was in another country. And then the head deaconess said to him one Sabbath, can you come for lunch at my house? And he said, sorry, no. And he didn't go. And the head deaconess had been planning this all week and had cooked nice food and everything. So she knew that the food would have to go to waste, so she was very upset about him. And she went to the head deaconess meeting midweek and said, don't invite that man to your house. He is very rude. But what had actually happened was she invited him on his fasting day. So we have a problem with how other people behave. And sure enough, church members had a problem with Zacchaeus coming down from his vantage point. Soon as he came down and accepted the invitation for Jesus to invite himself to his house for lunch, what happens next? The church members were not happy at all. Now, verse 10 says, Jesus came to do what on earth? To seek and save that which was lost. And Zacchaeus, till that point, had been lost. And Jesus finds him. After seeking for the whole of 33 years, he finds him. And church members put up an objection. You cannot eat at his house. Why? Because he's a sinner. For me to pronounce somebody else a sinner, I have elected myself to the vantage point. I have gone up my sycamore tree. I sit there looking down. I am looking down on others. And Jesus says what to me? Come down. Before Jesus can do anything at all with Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus must do what? He must come down. Without coming down, there's no lunch. You cannot have Jesus in your house if you are out there somewhere in a sycamore tree. You need to come down. Notice the sequence. I elect myself to the sycamore tree. It says Zacchaeus himself chose to go ahead and go up a sycamore tree on account of his stature. Now, if it was me, I would take my expensive handheld digital video camera up there, and by nightfall the story of me with an encounter with Jesus would be on Facebook, would be on Twitter, and all my groups on WhatsApp. Now, if Zacchaeus had done that, he might not have had lunch with Jesus because he'll be busy taking selfies and doing what sort. Yes? If the story doesn't relate to what we do now, then it is of no relevance to us. We need to ask, why was this story put in the Bible? And if it was put so that you can understand it in your context, then you need to understand it in your context. If it was put that you can just laugh at Zacchaeus for being short, then do that. But what you have to understand is Jesus will do nothing with you till you come down your sycamore tree. And when you do come down from your sycamore tree, your peers will be against you because of what you have done in the past. Everybody has got a history. If you want to understand people, have 2 ears and 1 mouth. God did not put that ratio for nothing. 2 ears and 1 mouth. You will understand people then. You might even graduate to understand God with your 2 ears. Because God tells you everything that He wants you to do. Right? I went for lunch at one house from this very church. And when we got to eat, the lady of the house started complaining about the pastor's wife's dress. So I asked a simple question. I said, do you remember what the sermon was about? And she didn't. So, she might have 2 mouths and 1 ear. Wrong equation. Zacchaeus comes down. The congregation goes ballistic on Jesus, the owner of Zacchaeus, the owner of the sycamore tree, the owner of the universe. And I have the cheek to complain to him who he should have lunch with. Do you remember Jonah when he woke up and found his nice plant gone? Do you remember that? And the one who had planted it said to him, where were you when I planted this tree? Do you remember that? We make wrong complaints to the wrong people about the wrong people. It's up to Jesus who he wants to have lunch with, according to his project. And his project is simple and straightforward. He has come to seek and save that which was lost. So Zacchaeus goes for lunch with Christ, and he has lunch regardless. But before he does, the Bible tells us he gladly welcomed Jesus. I don't know how long it was that Zacchaeus was up his sycamore tree. However, between that time and the time that he came down and the time that he went with Christ, he was a different man altogether. If you should meet Jesus and no change happens to you, you are the hardest nut to crack. Zacchaeus welcomed Jesus, but at the beginning we said he might have just been curious. So curiosity now translates to a change in it. Now let's look at it from an evangelistic point of view. Jesus finds whom he wants to speak to, and he is direct. There's no messing about. There's no, do you know what? I need to make a friend with this person, and when they are my friend, then I'll bring them to church, and they might just hear something that they understand in Sabbath school, and then maybe 2 years from now we can baptize them. Jesus hadn't got that time, so he just goes for the direct. Zacchaeus, come down, because I'm having lunch at your house. And sure enough, Zacchaeus comes down. Zacchaeus is as immediate as the message that is given. And during lunch, Jesus says to him, now, Jesus heard all these complaints. And Jesus promoted Zacchaeus from a nobody to a somebody. Let's see if we find that promotion. That is the promotion. And he says, what? Salvation has come to this house. And turning to the people who have been complaining, he says, even this who? Zacchaeus is also the son of Abraham. There are two people you will find were promoted in the Bible directly by Jesus. One of them is Zacchaeus, and the other one is John the Baptist. Jesus says of John the Baptist, he was the greatest man ever born to woman. Talking about John the Baptist. But John the Baptist calls himself a forerunner. A forerunner of whom? Of Jesus. And Jesus really makes that job very important. If you read about the two men that came to Jesus to ask if he was the Christ, you will understand how Jesus described John the Baptist. And then he describes also Zacchaeus as the son of Abraham. So we know from that the conversion took place. If you have lunch at your house and nothing happens to you when you have had lunch with Christ, you have a problem. So how do we know that this promotion was of any value to Zacchaeus? Zacchaeus turns around and says of his wealth. This is why I was telling you that Zacchaeus did not know how he got rich. Because the word that he uses is if. If I have stolen money from anybody, if I have cheated anybody, I will pay them back. How many fold? Fourfold. You must have been getting a lot of interest for you to be able to pay back 4 times what you borrowed. If your whole wealth is based on what you borrowed, that's a lot of interest. But Zacchaeus promised to pay everybody. That was his response to having suddenly become the son of Abraham. Even us can become sons and daughters of Abraham. But that will not happen if we don't come down our sycamore trees. Every single one of us has got a sycamore tree that we need to come down. And Jesus says, come down because today I am having lunch at your house. Why? Because salvation is brought to you in person. And you will be promoted to becoming the son of Abraham. It's a very important position to be. We all have 2 names that we carry with us. If you commit a crime, how many of you commit crimes? I commit a crime at least once a week. I don't know what happens, but as soon as I get in a car, something just snaps in my head. I have to drive it fast for some reason. Do any of you have that problem? Yeah. It's probably because when I learned to drive, I used to do motorbikes before I did cars. And to me, speed is very exciting. So I commit a crime maybe once a week or maybe twice a week. But that makes me a sinner, doesn't it? Yeah, it's wrong to commit crimes, by the way. But if I could pay back 4-fold as a promise of my atonement, I probably would. So this afternoon, is it afternoon yet? Yes. I urge you all to come down your sycamore trees. You can't come down till you identify what your sycamore tree is. Find it, come down, have lunch with God, and become the son or daughter of Abraham. Thank you very much.